Hey, lovely people. Welcome to Transformational Sound Therapy, how to use sound and the voice to heal your body, calm your mind, and empower your life. Today, we've got the awesome Eric Rankin with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric. It's an absolute honor to have you with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, bless you. So Eric has been immersed in the study of frequency for decades while researching and swimming with dolphins. It's one of my passions. For his best-selling novel, The Aquarians, Eric was introduced to the power of vibration as it pertains to revealing form to the mind of a dolphin. He is currently conducting sonic experiments at the world-famous Integratron. You say it.
Integratron.
Integratron. I've got it out before. In California's Mojave Desert, Eric has published many of his findings in the Sonic Geometry video series. Now working alongside some of the world's premier physicists, mathematicians, and audio engineers, Eric has been led to a unique geometric pattern he calls the Genesis structure, which he believes could reveal the geometric matrix of the quantum universe. He's been featured on Gaia TV for his research linking geometric forms and growth patterns to mathematically perfect major chords, and has been a featured speaker at conferences including Contact in the Desert and Star Knowledge. The host of the international radio show Awakening Code Radio, Eric has interviewed luminaries including Dr. Masaru Emoto, Deepak Chopra, Greg Braden, Marianne Williamson, physicists Menas Kafatos and Nassim Haramein, and frequency pioneer Jonathan Goldman. Welcome, Eric. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on the summit.
Thank you for putting this summit together. It's all about sharing this information. The time is now.
Absolutely. The time is absolutely right for this now. I just feel there's such a hunger for this knowledge that we all know is in us.
I'm looking at myself in this ridiculous size. So I made this fruit of life sculpture in my room, and I thought, oh, I'll just sit in front of that because I have some lighting in here, but it looks a little ridiculous. It looks
you look fantastic. It looks amazing. It looks amazing.
I'll move around so people can see it.
It's beautiful, and you made it yourself, didn't you?
I did.
Beautiful. So Eric, you bring a depth of knowledge and an overview of cosmic harmony and our mathematical resonant universe and how it not only affects us, but it can return us to wholeness. And you say that this is a simple knowledge that's been a mystery for too long. How did you become drawn into the world of cosmic harmony and sonic geometry?
That is a really interesting way to start this because math was not my thing. I am a musician, but music theory was not my thing, understanding how to deconstruct music and build it. But about 5 years ago, I was in my office. I manage an office building, and I literally heard a voice, and some people might call it a download or a visitation, and said, go to your conference room and draw a triangle on your whiteboard. And I'm like, who am I even talking to and what? But I did, you know, I've had experiences kind of like this before. And I drew the triangle and I'm like, okay, there. And the voice said, now write the sum total of the angles. And even though I failed geometry in high school, I did remember that a triangle, its three angles will always, and I'll do the three angles there, will always total 180 degrees. And I said, well, I drew the triangle, I wrote 180. And they said, no, now play that as a tone. And I'm like, play that as a tone? How would I do that? And then I'm thinking, gosh, there's probably apps, even though I've never tried it, but there are apps on our phones, tone generating apps. And I did that and I heard what 180 cycles per second sounded like. I'm like, okay, I did it. Like, no, now you need to, and I actually have since then I have a chime set here of, here's what 180 would sound like. I don't know if you can hear that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, well, there it is. And it's like, no, now you need to keep going. So I did a square. A square's sum total is 360, just like a circle. So that's, and right away, I'm like, oh, that's an octave of the first tone, meaning it's the same note, but twice as high in pitch. And then like, well, keep going. So the next shape is a pentagon. And I had no idea what the sum total of a pentagon was. I had to Google it. And it's 540, which is that. And my ear is picking up now that that's a fifth, that's a harmonic of this. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And they're like, okay, keep going. A hexagon. A hexagon is another version of this, only a different octave. And then a septagon is 900 degrees, and that's that. 900 sounds like that. And all of a sudden, and then octagon is another one of these. But if you play all the geometric tones together, you get. And I'm like, well, that's a major chord. That's the most beautiful form of music there is. And I was very excited. I'm like, this is some elemental thing that must be known and I've never heard about. So I rushed to my laptop. I went to my phone. I was Googling. I was YouTube searching, typing in any combination I could of frequency and geometry, or geometry reveals harmony or anything. And I could not find a single thing. And I'm like, that's almost impossible, that because you can Google search anything and find something.
Yes.
And I did not find anything. And that was the beginning of what became the Sonic Geometry Project. I went on, I did the dimensional geometric shapes, what's called the platonic solids. A tetrahedron is one of the platonic solids there, and revealed 4 out of the 5 platonic solids reveal this same chord. And then I did sacred geometry, more or less what's behind me, adding circles. And every time I started with one circle of 360, added a circle 720, added a circle 1080, it revealed the same chord again. So it's like geometry is always revealing this beautiful music. And then I'm up, I read about physics and stuff, even though I'm no physicist, but I have an interest in it. And I've heard physicists say we live in a geometric universe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, the connection is, if we live in a geometric universe, we live in a harmonious universe. We live in a system that is acting and designed in harmony in the most literal way possible. And the light bulb went off over my head, and I'm like, this is important stuff. And I have a friend that lives in Arizona, Alana Luna, who had kind of hinted that she was aware of things like this. And I just sent her this big piece of paper with all these numbers and shapes and things. And she just looked at it and said, oh my God, we have to make this video. And she had just graduated from a college to make video and audio production. She did it for free. We did the very first Sonic Geometry video with 0 budget. I wrote it, I narrated it. She produced it, created all the animations for it.
Wow.
We did 500 people would be interested in it, and a week we had 100,000 views.
Wow.
And something is happening here.
Yes, there's the hunger right there.
Yes, there's the hunger.
Yeah, it's the
and the vibration. People, it told us that this is something that people almost know without knowing that they know it.
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely that remembering, isn't it? You know, it's some primal knowing within us that there's more than what we're shown or what we can possibly see.
Absolutely.
So how is sonic geometry connected to nature and therefore to us?
Well, nature has certain patterns. It has algorithms that can reveal. The most famous algorithmic pattern is the Fibonacci cycle. And the Fibonacci cycle, you could just look at your hand. We have Fibonacci programming all over us, that we have this knuckle would be the shortest segment. The next knuckle would be this 1.6 is long. The next knuckle's finger segment would be 1.6 along. The phi ratio. We have the phi ratio everywhere. Our ears are designed that way.
Yeah.
As small as a little shell to as big as a galaxy have this spiraling design. And it's a very simple mathematical algorithm. Starts in 1, you take 0 plus 1, and your next number is the next step in the algorithm. So 0 and 1 is 1, 1 and 1 is 2, 1 and 2 is 3, 2 and 3 is 5, 5 and 3 is 8, and it just goes on into infinity. Mm-hmm. The unique about that, so when we see anything that, most plants, if you look straight down at them, succulents especially, you will see, or pine cones and the pineal gland, they come from the same root word. but they have this spiral design. The fascinating thing is the very first 6 steps of the pineal growth pattern, or the Fibonacci growth sequence, from more or less, imagine a seed just sprouting and the very first step of its growth. And then you take the first 6 steps. Incredibly, if you apply the math to that, it reveals the same chord again. So every Fibonacci sequence, as it starts, the very first 6 tones, if you apply those numbers as tones, will give you the same 1, 3, 5 perfectly mathematic major chord again, which is incredible to me. Geometry is revealing a major chord, and the Fibonacci sequence is revealing a major chord. That is profound.
Yeah, this is very much in line with Derek Scott Van Heerden's work as well, isn't it?
Well, let's talk about Derek. So we published that video it was the autumnal equinox of 2013. And we started getting, some comments down below, and we got one that just said, I have to talk to you, something like that, or how did you get this information? So I emailed him, and he had been working on a book, an ebook, and it had very similar information. He had put together the geometry revealed major chord harmonics. And he was, I think, even wondering, like, through his computer or, just typing it, did I somehow access his information? Because like me, he knew that there was not something else out there.
Oh, he's a genius.
Yeah, he became closely connected after that. Derek has engineered some tracks that we use out at the Integratron, because creating music with these numerically perfect harmonics is not something you can do. People are a little confused by this, and this is probably the time to talk about it. If you just sit down at a keyboard and play it, there is a process that we, in our infinite human wisdom, did, and it kind of messed up music. So let's first talk about how our musical scale came to be. That was Pythagoras. Mm-hmm. And we're going thousands of years now, and Pythagoras understood vibration, and he would vibrate a string, and he understood if you cut that string in half, you would get the same tone as the long string, but twice as high in pitch. Mm-hmm. And then he started doing mathematical ratios to reveal fifths. So our musical scale that most of the world uses, not in India and not in other places, but most of the world is using a musical scale that progresses by fifths. And it's like a circle. If you start at C, the fifth is G. Start at G, then the fifth is D. Go to D, it's A. A is E. And then it just circles around that finally you get to F, and then the fifth is C again. Those are mathematically perfect ratios, and it's mathematics that created that scale. And that's what Pythagoras would have understood and recognized.
Yeah.
But started making complicated instruments and playing chords together, like a C major. A C can be the first of a C major chord, or it can be the fifth of an F major chord. And sometimes they sound a teeny bit off to our ear, especially when it starts getting higher up on a keyboard, the higher octaves. So what we did is invented this system called equal temperament, and everything gets fudged a little bit to sound good enough to our ear. Well, good enough is not the way nature works. Good enough is what starts cancer or abnormalities. So if you look at the number sequences of our musical scale that we listen to every day, it doesn't matter if it's an instrument's been detuned to 432, it is equally tempered, where instead of seeing perfect whole numbers, you see weird numbers with decimal points and a bunch of numbers trailing off behind it. You just look at it and it kind of looks gobbledygooky. But if you look at numerically perfect harmonics, all you see are perfect numbers that octave and blend perfectly with each other. Yeah. So Eric, when he created music for us, he had to engineer each track. He had to record all the perfect Ds, and then he had to reset his computer and record all the perfect F sharp, reset his computer and record all the perfect As to build a D major chord.
Wow. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's so
He
deep
does.
into it, isn't he?
Yes.
He's amazing.
Yes.
Before we get on to the topic of 432, I just wanted to ask you a bit more about the Fibonacci. You say that numerically perfect frequencies activate our Fibonacci spiral-shaped pineal gland, which opens up and sees the greater reality. We don't need plants or medicines, we just need frequency, and that we can tap into it by using specific frequencies. And you say that harmonic signature has to be numerically perfect, as you were just saying, because perfection is important in not only geometry, but in nature, which is revealed in the Fibonacci. So how does the Fibonacci sequence fit into your work?
Well, it becomes really important, and to me, it just seems like a logical conclusion. We have a pineal gland, we have a Fibonacci sequence right in the middle of our brain, and a lot of people know this, the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is this, you know, scientists will just say that's the gland that controls our circadian rhythms, our sleep cycles in day and night, but we also know that it secretes the same molecular structures that take us on trips that plant medicines can take us on, ayahuasca and LSD. They allow us, a lot of people that experience those mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, end up seeing like a grid or a different version of reality, almost possibly what birds and whales and bees would see. And so if it is a perfectly designed pineal pattern, well, sound is moving through our perfectly pineal patterned ears to our perfectly pineal patterned pineal gland. Doesn't it make sense that the audio signals coming through should be perfectly Fibonacci pineal sequences as well to activate it? I think people talk about the calcification of the pineal gland and our diet and the fluoride in our water here in the United States anyway is fluoridated, that it gets this calcium buildup and all gunked up. But what I think might really be happening is the frequencies, if they are pineal spiraling frequencies and a combination, a triad building a chord, that it is activating and causing a virtual spin of our pineal gland. So recognize it's like this gland is here waiting in its design for to hear that design represented through audio to activate it. And that activation is a spin, like a calibration than a calcification.
Reflection, yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So it becomes hugely important. You know, music can sound good enough to our ears, but if frequency, I've seen graphs where frequency, imagine, does this many things, and music is this big a part of it. Frequency is the primordial force that makes everything.
Yeah.
And we're just tuning instruments to sound good enough to our ears, but we are frequency designed bio machines. We're supposed to be acting and living in concert with this frequency.
And even our DNA has the spiral, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's mathematically perfect. It is not close enough. It is.
Yeah. Yes. Brian Collins talks about this as well. Brian T. Collins, about the, you know, the closing of the spiral and into, you know, trying to make it into a circle and how detrimental that can be. Going on to numerical sequences, particularly the 432, in your video, the sonic geometry 432, the second one, you say there's an astonishing 14-tone matrix of synchronicity which appears, where all numbers representing every primary geometric shape, as well as many other numbers found in the most profound religious texts, such as the 72 names of the god in the Kabbalah. 108 is the number of times mantras and mudras are often repeated in Hindu ceremonies. 144 is a number sequence represented in the Great Pyramid. It's the number of days in a Mayan Baktun, and 144,000 is, of course, the number of chosen ones described in the Book of Revelation. What does this all mean, this repetitive number?
Well, that's really, yeah, I think that's why we're having this conversation. We don't know what this all means yet, but Einstein said coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. To me, coincidence is the universe's way of communicating with itself.
Yeah.
We are transducer, us in human form are the transducer, that we recognize patterns, we process it, and we're sending more or less back out to the universe just by thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many massive numbers of coincidences. 144 is one of them, and it's octave down 72. Here's one that came up. So while I was writing on my whiteboard that day, the very first day, and the number 2160 came up, and that's a harmonic. It's 1080 is an octagon sum total, double it is 2160. And I'm like, 2160, and somehow in my brain, I remember useless trivia facts and can't remember what I did with who yesterday for dinner, but I store these little trivial facts, and I happen to remember that the moon's diameter, if measured in miles, is 2160. Like, well, that's not even related to sound. And then an astrological age is exactly 2160 years, and the sum total of a cube is 2160. And I'm like, wow. How are all these things that seemingly unrelated, yet they have the exact same number sequence? So you follow the breadcrumb trail of numerical coincidences. Joseph Campbell called it mathematical mythology. And he stumbled across number 432 so often in his journeys, traveling the world and going deep into ancient myths and religions. And he said, what is the deal? He didn't know. He just saw that this number is showing up so much in all these different cultures that supposedly were not communicating with each other. I mean, the Mayans supposedly had no idea. The Mayans have 144,000 days as a back tune in their calendar. The Egyptians covered the Great Pyramid of Giza with 144,000 casing stones. Exactly. These two cultures were not, as far as we know, communicating with each other through time, and yet they arrived at the same number sequence of 144. It's almost like this information is ingrained in us somehow, and it is percolating and coming through right now at this moment.
Yeah.
It has to be significant. There's just too much. And that's, to me, when we talk about 432 and what I ended up calling the factor 9 grid in my video, it is not a musical scale like we know the solfeggio scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
That's an atomic scale, though, not a musical scale.
Yeah, it has an extra 2 notes. It happens to produce some numeric, mathematically perfect harmonics, and then some would sound odd to us. But if you lay it out on a grid, so if you start at 9 and you move by 9s, and then it goes to the next octave and it scales. You just double 9 and it goes again. You triple 9, it goes again. And then you look at all these numbers and you see, oh, there's 72, there's 432, there's 108, there's 864. There's 864, there's 86,400 seconds in our day. I mean, there's some awareness trying to trigger us of the significance of these numbers.
Absolutely.
And it is spanning thousands of years. Our ancestors from Sumeria, Egypt, Mayan culture here in the Americas, they knew there was something significant about these numbers, and either they were employing them and utilizing them, or they just knew that they were significant and they were forwarding them to us to figure it out. And now we have tons of scientific equipment. I mean, we have our smartphones. If you wanted to play a chord, numerically perfect chord, you would have had to go buy a tone generator 10 years ago. Nobody's buying tone generators unless you're some sort of audio engineer and you need to hear that. But now we can do it. So our technology is allowing us finally to apply these number sequences, and the way these number sequences speak to each other is harmony.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about the numbers, especially the solfeggio scale, which is an atomic scale, not a music scale. I studied it in depth for my master's degree. And also the 432 is a friend of mine, John Neal, he wrote the book All Done with Mirrors. He worked with Jean-Michel, the sacred geometer, for quite some years. And he said that 528 and 432 are both really important meteorological numbers.
Absolutely.
Found in structures and temples and stone circles around the world. So there's,
Yes.
somebody was receiving something to be that precise as well in what they built. And
yeah, the confusion happens when you said it, when you try and overlap, people are very confused. The internet is a great tool of information. It's also a great tool of misinformation.
a lot of copy and pasting of nonsense.
Yes. So we get this, what, David Horowitz and his partner Puleo, somehow it was about the time that the Da Vinci Code was super popular, and talking about this mystery of numbers and hidden, sequestered information that the church didn't want you to know. So they kind of applied that thought process to a musical scale, and they were confused themselves that the 5/2 is not a musical scale, and they try and defend it, and the more you hear them try to defend it, the more it just crumbles all around. And yet it is an important number sequence. It's I'm sure, like you said, the atomic scale. And there, I forget what that toroidal pattern is called now. I can't think of it right now because the atomic aspect is not my thing, but it is not a frequency scale, no matter how you try and explain it. And it certainly isn't solfeggio. Solfeggio is an Italian word for a mnemonic device that just says do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's all solfeggio is. It is not this mumbo jumbo of 5/28 and the mystery chord and the devil's note and all that stuff.
Yeah. Or anything that the Gregorians chanted out.
No, Gregorians did not know vibration cycles per second back in the 1100s.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, be warned if you're trolling the internet for
yes.
facts,
please.
Because
the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when somebody says solfeggio scale.
I had to study it. I wanted to study it as one of my modules for my master's, and I couldn't because I couldn't find anything on it that was peer reviewed or that meant anything at all. And I did actually interview somebody who did know, but unfortunately I wasn't able to publish it. So moving on from that, which is quite related, is you say any arbitrary unit of time can be used to measure vibration cycles, but none should be considered more correct than any other. We measure sound waves by the Sumerian second, which is 86,400 in a day, but we could have chosen any span of time. There are, like you say, 1,440 minutes in a day, the diameters of the moon, the sun, the speed of light in miles. How did you come to realize that, that's going in quite deep, isn't it?
Yeah, so we created the first video and we got mostly very positive reactions, but we had a lot of physicists and scientists who actually liked the video, but they tripped up. Nassim Haramein would have been one of them. They got tripped up in, you are cross-referencing a bunch of man-made scales. So if we talk about inches and miles versus meters, those are seemingly two different man-made scales. When you talk about seconds, a second could be anything.
Exactly.
An important one is the circle of 360 degrees. Everybody knows a circle is 360 degrees. It could be anything. It could be 10. It could be 1,000. Why is it 360? That's when the rabbit hole goes from this big to this big and keeps going, because now it's a narrative. It's a story. Why is a circle 360 degrees? That was what I had to figure out. And I just kept going back and back and back. What is the math system that gives us 360? It is not our metric base 10 math system. It is a math system that is still taught in India today, where you arrive at 12 on one hand. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on your 4 long fingers. And then your other hand becomes placeholders for 12. So once you get to 12 on this hand, you hold it. Add 12 again is 24. Add 12 again is 36, 48, and 60. That's where the 60 comes from, is this math system. It's called the 1260 or sexagesimal math system. Where did that come from? That came from Sumeria 6,000 years ago. That's where algebra is based on. That's calculus. All of these, everything that we do, every angle is the angle that it is because a circle was laid over it. Mm-hmm. So it became supremely important what Sumerians understood about this circle. And Then the argument became, well, it's still arbitrary. They were still humans that came up with this math system, and they're basing it just on some arbitrary math counting system, which is a great argument unless it's not arbitrary. And our world does something that is not arbitrary. It does three things. It rotates, that's a day. It orbits the sun, that's a year. And then it wobbles like a top, slowing down. And that is a very specific, non-arbitrary number. It takes 25,920 years for this wobble to take place. Well, if you start incorporating 12s and 360s into this wobble, you start getting all these numerics. For instance, if you take 25,920 and divide it by 60, what do you get? 432. There is an awareness. Now, these Sumerians, let's talk about what happened in Sumeria 6,000 years ago. They not only came up with this math system, they came up with the world's first writing system. They invented the first sailboat. They invented the first wheeled and axled vehicle, the first pottery wheel, the first loom to weave fabric. I mean, some first multi-story building, agriculture. This explosive moment of technologies we're still using today. They're just better. We're still driving around in wheeled and axled vehicles. We are living, I mean, there's books literally called Civilization Began in Sumeria. So we should be thinking very hard, what did these people know? And they launched the story that we are still living in today. And they even have a document called the King's List, where these rulers ruled for thousands of years in ancient Sumeria. The first king lived for 288 with a bunch of zeros behind it. The second king lived for 432 with a bunch, or 360 with a bunch of zeros behind it. And the third king ruled for 432 with a bunch of zeros behind it. Another numerically perfect major chord. Different than this one. Geometry is this chord. That's geometry. And then the king's chord that was listed in a document 6,000 years old. So they understood on some level the mathematics of numerically perfect harmonics, which is absolutely insane. That makes zero sense, because they couldn't, in our understanding, couldn't have understood that sound is vibration cycles and then measuring those cycles by a certain specific unit of measurement. Certainly they didn't have wristwatches, and yet they gave us the formula. They said, take that 12 of our Sumerian counting system, multiply it times 60 minutes, multiply it times 60 again, seconds, and you get 43,200 seconds of daylight, 43,200 seconds of night. They're sending us information, and eventually we're still, even the atomic clock is still giving us 86,400 seconds a day.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's incredible. It's the most incredible thing to me that there is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
it tells us that our ancestors knew something.
Yeah, I was going to go on to say that the system was implemented long before our ancestors could possibly know what it would reveal, and share it in the only way it could be shared, in the pure realm of mathematics. And you say that we've been catching up slowly, coming to realize that a message has been making its way across the cosmos into our collective consciousness for thousands of years. And the message is harmony, which is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Do you feel we're getting that message?
I do. Well, we're talking about it, and hopefully some people are watching it, and those people are getting the message. So whether they're fully grasping it or understanding it, they're still getting the message. The information is coming through. And I encourage people, get your phones or listen to music that is like some of Derek's music has been composed specifically of mathematically perfect harmonics. Expose yourself. You don't have to know any of the information. Just expose yourself to tracks that are created with these mathematically perfect ratios, and maybe just the information's coming through that way. The structure is when you combine tones. That's why this Holy Trinity, think of that we've heard the term Holy Trinity. And what is a major chord? It is a trinity. That's significant. So now you're layering tones on top of each other. So there's cymatics. I imagine you've probably had someone, or you know what cymatics are. So I have a cymatics lab near me. We went and played the King's chord in his cymatic device through water. And we all know that the lotus is one of the symbols of awakening. You know, we've seen the flowering lotus through many different cultures. The lotus flower is that symbol of awakening. When we played 288, 360, 432, the numbers contained in this 6,000-year-old document, it created a 3D lotus pattern that held and moved. It looked like individual flames. And the operator who's been doing this research for 15 years says, I have never seen that. So it's any one tone. It is the layering of mathematically perfect frequencies over each other.
Yeah, that's amazing. It must have been quite a thing to see.
It was a shocking moment, and you can go to Vimeo. I think it's ER triad test in Vimeo, and you can watch that short clip, 20 seconds or so, and see it.
Amazing. I got from your video as well that you said the Sumerian texts actually show an understanding of vibration and frequency, conveying a logic, defying awareness of harmonics, geometry, and even the maths of creation. What do you mean by that?
Well, we go back to this incredible moment of Sumerian awareness, how they invented all of this in such a short time. But another thing, the first graphic symbol called the caduceus, the two snakes winding up a staff, that was at the same moment, same time. That was a Sumerian invention as well. So you see this pattern. If you draw it flat in 2D, you see what looks like frequency patterns, you know, curve, and a frequency pattern looks like this. It pulses. So as the wave, the sine wave is going up here, the cosine wave is down beneath it, and then it just keeps going. You know, it looks like a ribbon of these things stretching across. Well, it's not flat like this. It is actually dimensional, like more like this, or more rounded, like a glass ampule. But if you're talking about geometry has to have edges, it has to have faces. So this is a fascinating thing that, you know, we talk about throughout history. We've seen a shape like this, from the Christian ichthus fish to the Eye of Horus to the Providence to our own eye or leaves. Geometry, this is the holy grail of geometry. And geometry for most people is straight line, hard angles and straight lines. And the smallest reduction is always like the holy grail. So a tetrahedron is the holy grail of geometry. It has its points, it has its faces, and it has its edges, its hard edges. But if you curve geometry and make it look like frequency, you get the true smallest containment field. And that's this. It still has points, 2 of them instead of 4. It still has edges, 3 of them instead of 4. It still has faces, but this is the true smallest geometric solid. And there's an artist known as named Michael Evans, and he's done lots and lots of work holding this shape and what it does. And this shape ends up building sacred geometry in not 3, but 4 planes of existence. So it's like 4D sacred geometry is built on this shape. And it pulse, it looks like frequency. And those Sumerians were loading us with this shape all over the place. So it seems like they knew.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? Are you saying that there's like a resonance, a cosmic resonance that comes through all these beautiful...
I have to think something like that all of nature understands this on a... We don't know how nature processes. We don't know if there's consciousness in a tree or an insect or an animal. We know we have it. But I have to think that we're unique, that yes, we have consciousness, but we have separated ourselves from the beautiful design frequency aspect of what nature is doing all around us, while everything else is flowing with it and building and using it. Is it conscious that it is using this technology? We don't know yet, but I have to, yes. And I think animals like dolphins, highly processing, big brain sentient beings, dolphins and whales are well aware of frequency and that we are living in a frequency structure. Everything that we know, that we call reality and think it's hard, is a frequency structure. Everything.
Yeah. So it's more about, when they say get in the flow, and be in the flow.
Literally.
Yeah. Whales are said to travel along the ley lines, aren't they, in the ocean, which I've heard that the Navy use as well, which is quite detrimental to them. So yeah, that's a really deep topic. So, I mean, you do say when we play together as frequencies, the number of all the primary geometric shapes, what presents itself as a 3-tone numerically perfect major tone.
Yeah,
and that
major
nature
chord.
is a force existing in harmony with itself. Yeah, make perfect sense, wouldn't it, really? Why would a universe be created that wasn't in harmony with itself? So somewhere along the way, we've kind of fallen off the path, you'd have to say.
Where we think we're so dang smart, and we're gonna, if we keep ourselves alive on the planet long enough, we are going to look at this moment in history as exciting as it is. I mean, this is this is probably the pivotal moment. If there's life on other planets, which I would have to believe there is, the pivotal moment is when you go from, the word's escaping me, from the algorithms of push and pull mechanical structure to binary coding. That's the moment when things change. And in that moment, we've gone from analog, that's the word I was thinking of and I couldn't think of it, we have shifted from analog, where everything is cause and effect, push, pull, yes, no, and we're moving into, taking that information, moving into binary. That's the jump. That's the giant.
That's interesting.
We're going to look at this as the kindergarten baby step in where we're going if we shift our consciousness. That is the big thing that's missing in our experience here on the planet. Is we are conscious beings, but our consciousness is very low right now compared to our technical ability. We're low consciousness. We're thinking if we're threatened, we have to kill or take over or hoard things. Dolphins don't do that. Dolphins don't build anything. They have big brains. They live in social structures. They have families, but they have all the food they need. They follow it. They don't live with borders. They don't live in fear. They have no predators. We're living in a low density consciousness, getting higher in technology. That's a dangerous combination, actually. If you are taking your consciousness and saying, well, let's just neutralize the enemy. That's the way we used to do it with rocks. Now we're neutralize the enemy with atomic and hydrogen bombs. That's not a good combination. Yeah. So if we keep ourselves alive long enough, we're going to see how all of this really works and probably loop back around in spiral fashion and understand how things like the Great Pyramid of Giza were built. They were not built by any technology that we possess today. We could not build the Great Pyramid of Giza with the cranes and trucks and lifting devices that we use today.
So we need to go back in time to understand our place in the world today, essentially.
We're looping back around. You know, it's a beautiful analogy, because it's like we're spiraling around, but we're not looping around. We're not going back in time and arriving at the place. We're spiraling. So we're actually moving forward and then arriving at a similar place, but that much further ahead.
Yeah.
So we're taking that information and applying it further ahead in the timeline.
Yeah, so it's remembering what we once knew and bringing back the best of that to be in this.
And applying it to the new now, not the old now. We're not going back, we're applying it to the new now.
So within that, from what we've been saying, it does sound as well that we need to have a greater connection with nature and remember our place, you know, that we are.
That's the invitation.
Part of nature, yeah. It's amazing. I
It
love,
is.
I love what you say. We are alive in this moment to affect the outcome. A life in this moment is waiting to see what happens from here, which is really beautiful. So when we are in that awareness, you know, and allowing ourselves to bring that information forward, then, you know, who knows what we might be capable of, you know, becoming, like you say. I mean, it makes you sort of question, who is the enemy? What is this enemy that we've, you know, or not us specifically, but
We're such an interesting species. We are both the midwife to this, the birth of this information to our future progeny, or we are the destructors as well. That's the unique thing about us human beings, is we're that bipolar, at least in the moment. You and I and all these people, Derek, and these people that this information is coming through, we're helping to birth or possibly rebirth this information to future generations.
yeah,
But we're also the species that can just, the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said, if an ancient or an alien culture came and visited us, their field report would just say, this was a species that knew one thing and did another. We want to know the right things and build doing on the right things. And nature is providing us time and time again with the mathematics and the structuring and frequency aspect of our existence. We're supposed to be applying that, not fighting it. And equal temperament in tuning is a fight against the natural layering of mathematical frequencies.
would you say there's been like a natural evolution on the planet? You know, my son says, are you saying God is wrong? You know, if I sort of say, oh, this shouldn't be like that, why is that happening? You know, it's like this whole thing of everything is perfect and we are evolving as we should in this perfect moment and everything's unfolding.
Well, you could look at religious texts. I haven't read all of the, you know, the Quran all the way through. I have read all the way through the Bible, and you will hear that God or the gods, every once in a while, there's a slip up in the Bible, and you will hear a collective we instead of just the one Almighty. And there were moments where we were throttled back intentionally. The flood was an intentional throttling back. The Tower of Babel story was an intentional throttling back. So it almost seems like has it been a natural progression? No, I don't think it has been. I think it has been fits and spurts, and there's been some sort of divine intervention saying, all right, they're learning this much too fast, but they haven't connected with their consciousness at the same pace. And we are vibrating at that moment when, if we don't match consciousness to what we know scientifically true and build on that, leveling our consciousness matches as we move into the future, we are a species in trouble. And it's not that we're being punished. God is not punishing us. Nature is not punishing us. Nature is doing what nature does.
Yeah.
If you fight it, it will just go, eventually you're going to be gone.
Yeah, we're doing it to ourselves, exactly.
We're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, I did say this with somebody the other day. My daughter's reading an amazing book at the moment, and she said the only reason that we are at the top of the food chain is because we got there too fast, and because we didn't get there naturally like every other animal did. We are now living in fear because we shouldn't really be there. You know, all the animals that would kill us are all locked up in cages, so no wonder we're living in fear. The animal kingdom's in fear, and it's like this whole fear-based reality going on over the planet. You know, we're just trying to control absolutely everything, and that's not how nature works. You know, so
fear and separation are our species' primary motivators at the moment. They don't need to be. Dolphins are not living in fear and separation, or whales.
Absolutely.
We don't trust our neighbors. We believe we have to hoard things up. We have to build things. We have to clothe ourselves. We live in a lack mentality, even though we don't necessarily have to. We could shift our country more than enough resources to support even the 7 billion or 10 billion people are going to be on the planet. But we invest, I mean, here in America, look, half of our taxes are spent on the industrial military complex. We are investing in ways to kill our our own species, just
Yeah.
them over there. There is no over there. We're all here on this.
Yeah,
And
no, yeah.
this unity consciousness, and we're so fear-based. It's like, oh, you're talking about the New World Order. You know, you're talking about something where we're all together ruled by a something. If we're going to stay in fear, we are done for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. That will be the big shift. Is we are getting some information. We're getting literal information that says the universe is acting in harmony with itself. We invite you to do the same thing. The universe is inviting us to act in harmony with our own species, our environment, the animals we share the planet with, our ecosystem. That's what the invitation is right now. It is the universe is saying, here's your invitation. Here's the proof you need to show this beautiful, organic, harmonic design of everything. You can keep fighting it if you want, but if you do, you're done for.
Oh,
Feelings, it's your choice.
I've got a complete goosebumps all over me. Yes, absolutely. You know, we are a part of it. And if we keep fighting that and being closed down and living in that fear, what it is, it's just our own self-destruction. And that's reflected in, the amount of violence and addiction and poverty and homelessness. And it's
pollution.
We live on a planet of love. It's like, this is the planet of love. We are made of love. How did it get to be like this?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. So thank goodness for people.
Well, let me interrupt a little bit, because people say we were designed in love. You say that, and people would go, oh, now you're just throwing in a bunch of new age happy hippie talk to say we were designed in love. But listen, there's a logic behind that. If everything is frequency, let's call our emotions frequency bands, because everything is frequency, our emotions are frequency. If you could choose any frequency, you are a creator, and you understand that frequency is what builds everything, and you understood emotions in their full scale, from everything from total fear and separation to the opposite of it, total love and compassion and kindness, which would you choose?
Exactly. And what is the perfect state?
You would choose love. So the creator, understanding frequency, would choose love as the organic design behind everything. So very fairy to say that we are designed in love. We were. Love is the high frequency of emotions. Everything is a frequency band. Everything is, even thought waves are frequencies. Love is the highest one. It's the one we would choose. It's the one a creative entity and intelligence of the universe would choose for itself.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
If we want to be.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is if you have done some meditation, or if you have been out walking in nature and you come across a beautiful woodland or a beautiful scene, or you've watched a beautiful sunset, or you've swum with dolphins, or you've had an amazing sound healing session, or voice healing, or whatever, how you feel, and that's peace, and you come to a state of peace with yourself, and that's how you're meant to feel. It's our natural state.
Yes, it's not just peace, it's connectedness.
Yeah.
When you feel connected, when you feel truly connected, you start not wanting to harm the thing that you are connected to. So I've done some plant medicine journeys, and the thing that I come away with is this hyper feeling, not just of peace, but of connection. When you value that connection, I'm connected to that tree, I'm connected to that person, I'm connected to that star, and everything, you start living differently. When you truly believe it in every cell of your body, I'm connected to the whole thing, and you are. The whole thing is connected to the whole thing.
Absolutely. We're all a part of the whole. How
That's
could
right.
we not be? We're made of earth and bone and water.
Stardust. We are literally stardust.
Yeah, floating around in space.
Yeah.
Eric, obviously we've learned what we can gain by knowing this information. It's just endless. But is there a practical application to your research and discoveries that you could?
I think the practical application is going to be in the layering of these mathematically perfect frequencies. We all have this pineal gland. All mammals have this pineal gland. It's not just humans. All mammals have a pineal gland. That when that gets activated, or in my view, my research and my belief, calibrated, when we are recalibrated using frequencies, it is going to open up our senses to this connection, whether we see it visually or feel it or use our math to understand, wow, we are the same math system. How we came to be, our Fibonacci design all over our body is the same Fibonacci design as that snail, as that plant, as that galaxy. We start living differently. So the practical application is we're prolonging our experience to keep learning. And if what we learn is the frequency aspect of our existence, we start focusing more on frequency, less on density, and we start becoming possibly the light beings that the New Agers talk about, that frequency and consciousness. If you're a frequency master, maybe you don't need a body anymore. You don't travel to other galaxies in spaceships. You travel because you understand frequency, and your consciousness can take you there instantly.
Absolutely, which is the whole thing behind telepathy and prayer, intention.
So much more to learn.
Yeah.
So much more to learn and utilize and implement.
Absolutely. You say everything's free energy. What are the best ways we can tap into it? How can we remain connected? How can we tap into this?
Well, I have a radio show, Awakening Code Radio, and we had a guest on, and we were talking about health, physical health. And she's a medical doctor, and the things that she was talking about, the things we can do for our medical health, more or less prolonging ourselves to learn more, is to almost go back to life as it was 500 years ago. Eat organic food, drink good water, receive sunlight, rest, but also be active. All we don't do now. We're not active because we're sitting in front of screens. We're eating processed foods. We're drinking dead water. We think that the sun is dangerous. The sun is not dangerous if it's doses. Those are the things you can do right away. It's like participate in the system. We think we're so clever in this system we have made for ourselves with all this technology, but we don't understand what the technology does. We don't understand the implications of what EMFs are doing to our bodies. We are beginning to understand pollution. The ocean is not just one big giant waste dump that we can continue to keep throwing stuff in. It's just participate in the design. Go out and be in the matrix as nature intended. Live more naturally. You're going to open up. You're not only going to but you're going to start flowering into what nature is. It is a connective matrix system. It's like the movie The Matrix, but it's not scary. There is a real matrix holding everything together, and being in nature brings you into it.
And singing and playing music and dancing and all those beautiful things that, make us feel good, celebrations and ceremonies and rituals that we've kind of forgotten as well along the way. Yeah.
Well, think of frequency. I mean, think of our earliest cultures, and virtually every religious system has some sort of sound related to it. And the older the religious structure, the more primordial the sound was. The didgeridoo, the gong, the chime, the bell, the ohm. Those were not complex things. They were simple frequency bands. And then we build these structures, these chapels and temples that held the sound. Temples built very specifically the way they were built to hold frequency in a certain way. Again, like old awareness that's still there. The Great Pyramid of Giza is still there, and I'm convinced it was a frequency machine. It was built using frequency, and its purpose was somehow frequency. I read a great article that it was like a harmonic balancer. Car engines have harmonic balancers, or they used to, and that the Great Pyramid of Giza was big enough to take. Earth has its own frequency between the top of our surface and the bottom of the ionosphere. it's called the Schumann resonance. A lot of people think the earth is vibrating and creating this. It is not really that. It takes a pulse of some time, and it's usually lightning strikes, and you can measure this pulse of frequency between the surface of the earth and the bottom of the ionosphere. That's about 8 hertz or so, in the ballpark of. But I have a feeling it used to be 9, and we are accelerating back to 9. I have not shared this really with anybody. That's a gut feeling, but that Earth's Schumann resonance used to be a perfect 9, and that's why, and we're very close to it, and it is increasing again, that all of a sudden things like the Great Pyramid of Giza being a harmonic balancer big enough that it stabilized that force. And all of a sudden, maybe in the stabilization of these frequencies, something just appears. You just see stuff like a lot of people think there are spirit beings, light bodies, conscious forms floating all around us. All people see orbs that when you get the harmonics just right, boom, you're just in a frequency reality that has always been there, but we can't see it with our eyes, so we think it's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I was talking with Jill Matson, she made an amazing discovery about Stonehenge, and the stone circles. When everybody stands with their backs to one stone and sings out into the middle of the circle, it actually creates a geometric shape, which could obviously be used as some kind of amplification system. There's something going on there that we can't see. And it's only unless you have this knowledge and, go in and do those things in that certain way that it was designed to, that you're going to actually discover what that was for and what that does. And it's definitely got dumbed down somewhere along the way, that knowledge.
And here's a way of that, I grew up in a Christian belief system and then kind of moved more towards sort of Buddhist and high consciousness. But if somebody were to ask me, what is God to you? I would say God is mechanical functions like spin and pulse. So if you take spin, like a vortex, and you apply frequency to it, which frequency is pulse, it looks like that, all of a sudden you create standing wave patterns. You create multidimensional standing wave patterns. If you create a pattern that holds, even though you can't see it, all of a sudden it's something you can drape something else over. So spin and pulse, motion and rest. Jesus in the book of Thomas said, I am motion and rest. Like understanding that pulse is everything. If we get that and we start creating with sound and multidimensional frequencies, creating a holding pattern, all of a sudden we're creating.
As the rest of the universe presumably is. So we're just joining in the river of life once more.
That's why it's important that we need to be conscious, because if we start being able to truly create with our technology, we can create life forms or things. Our consciousness better be somewhere close to it, or we're in a whole new dangerous thing. I mean, artificial intelligence. Guys like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking were nervous about artificial intelligence because we're not thinking what it might do on its own without our involvement. Our consciousness is so important. Consciousness needs to be, in my opinion, I'm no physicist, I couldn't do the most simplest physics equation, but to me, there should be a symbol for consciousness in every physics equation that says, and there's a knowingness about this.
That's amazing.
It reaches out and in, both quantum, it reaches into the astrophysic realm and goes down to the quantum physics realm, is consciousness, is intelligence. And physicists are starting to use that language, that you break it down and go, what is behind everything? And some physicists are actually saying intelligence or awareness or consciousness.
Yeah, and shamans have said this for centuries, that intention is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hope our intention is aligned with our higher consciousness.
Absolutely, because intention is just a focused thought, which is energy. So,
yes,
by focusing that, then we can do good stuff. Eric, it's been absolutely fascinating talking with you. Do you have a closing message for our listeners?
You know, I just thank you, Jen, for coordinating this whole event. And I just encourage people to keep exploring. We are not done by any stretch of the imagination. In some ways, we are just beginning. And we want to incorporate, we want to open our eyes and not call it ridiculous to believe that our ancestors knew something profound and build on that with our current technology, see where that takes us. But don't lose sight that frequency is everything. And that's what we've been talking about this whole hour. Your whole symposium is frequency. It is the primordial source.
Mm.
And create frequency. We have tone generators built into our physiology that most animals do not. They make sound, but they don't have a vibrating voice box the same way we do. Hum. Jonathan Goldman just says, hum. You can hum so deep that you can vibrate your tailbone in your body by just the note that you hum. Play around with frequency just in your own physiology.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are instrument, aren't we? So
We are.
and we can be a channel. If we're clear, we can be that channel and
Sure.
be attuned with the world of which we're a part. So why wouldn't,
Hopefully.
why wouldn't we? Yeah. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight and an honor to have you
Thanks,
with
Jen.
us. Thank you. Okay.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Bless you. And
maybe like this frequency.
yeah.
create that with your
yeah,
and maybe that's what they were doing. Maybe it was never flat like that it was more loose. If you relax your hands, they don't do that.
True, yeah.
They do that, and it just happens to be about 60 degrees. If you start building sacred geometry, it's more or less that.
Interesting. That might have been brought in at some point. But yeah, stay tuned, lovely people. We've got another amazing interview tomorrow. We can learn more about this fascinating subject. Take care and stay tuned.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.